Hello, my name is Leianne Lamb, and welcome to Realities of an Asian American Artist. Today, we are absolutely thrilled to be talking to Nobuko Miyamoto, and we're going to read a little bit of her intro. Nobuko is a groundbreaking artist, activist, and artistic director of Great Leap. Born in Los Angeles in 1939, she began her career as a dancer and actress, performing in productions like West Side Story and Flower Drum Song. In the 1970s, Nobuko shifted her focus to political activism, co-creating the influential album A Grain of Sand, the first to address Asian American identity through music. She founded Great Leap in 1978 to use the arts for social change, blending music, dance, and theater to uplift unrepresented voices. Nobuko's work continues to inspire new generations of artists, and her memoir, Not Your Butterfly, chronicles her journey as a pioneer in the Asian American movement. Welcome, Nobuko. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me to be here.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to talk to you. Yeah, it's an honor to speak to you today. Your career as a dancer, singer, and artistic director has not only spanned decades, but has also helped shape the Asian American arts movement. You've blazed a trail for so many artists, and your work continues to inspire new generations. And today I'd like to dive into a little bit of your thoughts and your journey and what it means to be an Asian American artist and some of the lessons that you've learned along the way.
Not even. Let me go back to being a child of Japanese American concentration camps
Thank you.
and being removed from our home, being removed from family and friends, and sort of losing a sense of place or home or belonging at the age of 2. And I think that's an important part of my story because I was very quiet and withdrawn, shy, afraid, because I had no sense of where I was. Because we not only went to Santa Anita Racetrack, they sent us to Montana, then we went to Idaho. We moved around and then settled for a little while in Utah. And all those moves, uh, you know, my family, my mother and father tried to act like it was normal, but it was everything but normal. And so, but when we got out of camp, one of the first things my father did was to celebrate and took my mother and myself to this concert of classical music. And that just changed my life. When I saw 100 musicians on the stage in the Salt Lake City performance hall with it was the music just lifted my spirit, and I wanted to be part of that music. Um, so when I went home, I started listening to my father's records. I started dancing. I was only 4 years old, but it was a world that feel would help me express my feelings when I had no other way of expressing them. And so my mother, at the age of 4, saw this. She found a dance school in the middle. This is 1944. The war is still going on, and she puts me in a dance school because she herself wanted to be an artist. My father loved music. He wanted to be an artist, and he was both being Nisei. They were denied that privilege, and so they wanted to give me something that I loved to do. It wasn't about a career, but that something, just even taking a dance class and having a sense of place where I could be amongst other young people, I could be with music, and then eventually a few years went by, and then I was on a stage. I was performing on a stage, and performing on a stage is a powerful act. And you out in the audience, so you're interested in being a performer, whether it's an actor or a singer or dancer, whatever. When you perform, it takes bravery to, first of all, to step on the stage and to know what you're going to do and how you're going to present yourself. Uh, but it also gives you a sense of place. Uh, this is a small world that you have control over when you don't really have it anywhere else, or very little control. So anyway, so that was my beginning. And then at 7 years old, I got very serious about wanting to dance. And the war was over. We were back in Los Angeles. And then I began a rigorous training program, and which led me to American School of Dance, which gave me like an incredible, well-rounded training in dance, ballet and modern and jazz, and it really allowed me a kind of dance vocabulary to be able to do all kinds of work. But the reality is, when I went to auditions, what kind of jobs were there for somebody that looked like me? And that's when I got my first lesson of being an Asian in America. At that time, they called us Orientals. Uh, and you could clearly see there were certain jobs that we could do, and blondes had more fun, more opportunities, more abilities to make money, etc. So the kind of training I had, and my dance director of our school told me, in order for me to work and make my living as a dancer, I would have to be twice as good as everyone else. So that's a good thing in one way, and a hard thing for a 13-year-old or 12-year-old to hear. You understand that life is unfair because of what you look like, but it's also like a challenge, and I took it as a challenge, and I had the support of somebody who believed in me, and in my the director of the school, and was going to push me into excellence. And whether you're an actor or you're a dancer or a musician, excellence is something you need to strive for and work for. So I think training is really important. Training is critical because of who we are. Uh, or anyone who's serious about theater, we should have training. We have to know what we're getting into, and have tools to be able to use at different times for different things. And those things grow as your career moves on. Anyway, Leianne, do you want to go back to questions, or do you want me to keep going?
Oh, please keep going. I think you're on a really good flow.
So my first job, I was 15 years old, and I auditioned for a movie called The King and I. And because that worked for my advantage, actually, because there were few Asian well-trained Asian dancers. And even though I was underage, and 20th Century Fox would have to only work me 4 hours a day, and then I had to go to school 4 hours in a day, because there were four of us that were Asian American who were underage, and we all went to school and we all worked 4 hours. But I was lucky because Jerome Robbins happened to be one of America's great choreographers, and that training, that not only performing in it, but learning, and the rigor that we went through. And the next job that I had was with Jack Cole, who was one of America's jazz innovators, who also liked working with Asian people, because he respected Asian art forms. He actually borrowed a lot of these forms, East Indian dance, to integrate in his jazz uh, vocabulary. So it was, I was able to work with two of America's great choreographers, Jerome Robinson, Jack Cole, and that was like my foundation uh, after my school training, my dance school training, to actually work under these people. And my only desire at that time was to be a good tool, to be a good tool for what they were trying to express. And I wanted to be able to, my body to be able to think before, to anticipate what then they want me to do, and be able to execute. So that was my training. And then I went on, I did Flower Drum Song on Broadway and became sort of a featured dancer in that. And but I've there were a lot there actually, that was in the late 50s, 58, 59, and there were several shows, a few shows on Broadway at the time, Tea House of the August Moon, that had Asian performers in it, sometimes a single performer that played an Asian stereotype. But, and The World of Susie Wong was another one. So Flower Drum Song was on one side of the street, and The World of Susie Wong was on the other side. And on the billboards, they had us, these Asian women, with slitted skirts up our legs and, sexy poses, etc. And that was the draw to get people to come into the theater. So, but anyway, so I was on the stage one night. It was actually a matinee, and it was almost all white women who had come in from, they bring them in the buses for the matinee. And this is a piece called Chop Suey, Chop Suey, and we're singing straight at the audience. Chop Suey, Chop Suey, and I'm feeling like uncomfortable. Like, why are they looking at us like that? With these pleased faces, just, there was something about it. I just felt, ugh, I don't like this. And I didn't know what it was until later it hit me. Oh my God, we're chop suey. We're their chop suey. We're Chinese food for white people. This performance was made for white people. It wasn't, even though the original show was written by a Chinese American, the show was created on Broadway by Rodgers and Hammerstein. They touted it as an all Asian cast. That's true. They tried to show the Asian family and living in Chinatown and the conflicts, etc. But still, the presentation, anyway, it made me uncomfortable. And it set me searching for something else. And making me ask, where are our stories? So this was 1959-ish, and I decided, when everybody else went to do the show in England or whatever, and I came home to Los Angeles, and then they happened to be in 1960, started making a movie called West Side Story. And oh my God, I had seen West Side Story in New York on the stage, and I went, I want to do that. The dance, the drama, the music. But I couldn't, because I was working with Flower Drum Song, but here was in the movie, and even though I was Asian, somehow I got through this rigorous audition, and they did a screen test. They put dark makeup on me, and they figured I could pass for Puerto Rican. And so we not only had to dance to pass, we also had to look a certain way And so I was lucky. And I had also worked for Jerome Robbins before. So uh, I knew how to work for him. And I was used to the rigor. But I was able to dance for the first time with people that weren't Asian, and um, and the best. And I actually felt very Japanese all of a sudden. I just felt very shy, and oh, everybody else was loud and, outgoing, and I was feeling very Asian. And I had to really push myself to to feel comfortable, and to take on another character that was not typical of the things that I had uh, normally had the opportunity to do, which was great. But I also got the opportunity to sing. So I loved to sing as a child. I had a great singing uh, teacher in our grammar school who believed that children can read music and sing 3 and 4 part harmonies, and did Bach chorales with us. So I loved to sing in the group, and I just loved music. I mean, music was the reason I danced. But when they put me, and I was singing I Feel Pretty, and that was fine, and we recorded it and everything, that was fine. And then after the movie was shot, they took me in the studio with just me and a microphone, and just for my voice on the side of the screen to come out, or maybe it's fleas, my big line by myself. And I was sitting in that booth, and the music came around, and I was like, I had a really hard time singing by myself. I had to do it again and again and again, and I finally they got it out of me. But I walked out of there like, what is going on? Why can't I sing by myself? Why can't I sing by myself? What am I afraid of? So that sent me on a journey. And I decided I want to get over this. I don't want to be afraid of my own voice. And where did that come from anyway? And it definitely came from my upbringing and being Asian in a society that expected us to be quiet, expected us to be, you know. So anyway, I found a Black coach who trained some of the other singers in West Side Story, and he just very patiently uh, started training me and encouraged me, and took me out in places and made me sing in front of people, even if it was in a small little nightclub. And I got used to finally accepting that I had a voice and that I had the ability to improvise and sing. And then I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I could pick songs that I wanted to sing. I didn't have to wait for somebody to give me a job. Maybe I could make my own job. Maybe I could sing, be a chanteuse. So that was a whole other career that I walked into in 1967. I was in a nightclub in Seattle called the Colony Club, and I actually headlined and my own act, and that gave me a training. For 8 months, I sang there. My manager was the manager for Pat Suzuki at one time, years before, and he just gave me the space that I could sing 8 shows a week. 2 shows on Saturday night, Friday night, and 3 shows on Saturday night, 3 shows on Sunday night, and I just had a chance to train and get used to getting up there with all kinds of audiences and have a band and sing with a band. And so that finally I got over my fear of my own voice. And but I was also moving towards a moment of feeling like I could be independent from a show business that loved to stereotype Orientals in certain roles, and I was really determined to break out of that. So I, at the same time, this is 1967, and it was the height of the Vietnam War. And sometimes in this club, young people would come in and, you know, late at night, they'd be talking about the war and tomorrow we're going to have a demonstration. You want to come to the demonstration? And I'm like, wow. It was the first time I started thinking about something outside of a career. And I'm wondering, why am I singing in a nightclub when there's a war going on with people that look like us being killed? And people are marching, but I'm feeling like, I don't want to. I felt uncomfortable about actually protesting or going on a march or. So that was a big turning point for me. So when I went back to Los Angeles, even Los Angeles was different then. 1968. And I decided, here we are in this moment of voting, I decided to volunteer to register voters for the Democratic Party and work for McCarthy, who was against the war. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do this. So it was the first time I stepped out of my role as an artist and got engaged in something bigger than myself. And that really opened a world up to me. I had always been concerned about my career, my beautiful career. And now suddenly the world was getting bigger and I was feeling a little bit more a part of it. And I met, somebody introduced me to an Italian filmmaker, Antonello Branca. He was making a film about the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers. It was a documentary, a sort of a documentary drama. He asked me if I wanted to help him make this film. So I said yes. And I landed in the middle of the Black struggle and was in a world, you know, it wasn't really far from where I was brought up or born even. But it was a world that I wasn't familiar with. I went to school with Black people. I lived down the street from them, but I didn't have that much to do with Black people because, for one thing, Japanese people didn't want their children to be hanging out with Blacks. And even though we went to school together, etc., we didn't socialize. So this was a big opening for me as well, because then I got serious and said, well, this is life and death here. These people are being treated in a way that's totally unjust. And the Panthers also looked to somebody like me and understood that being Japanese American meant that we went to camp. And they realized that doing what they were doing could cause them to go to camp or to prison. And many of them did. So there was this, they saw me as a sister. And I that was a big change for me. And then and Antonello was very political. He was very dedicated to tell stories that were true. And I went to a lot of demonstrations, and I also was exposed to the Panthers who had a big respect for culture and what culture could do, telling our stories in visual arts, in music. And Elaine Brown was a singer, and there were other singers within the party who used music to tell their stories and to gather people. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. So when we shot something in New York City for this film, and we were in this church, which they call the Young Lords Church. And the Young Lords was a group, sort of like the Panthers, but they were Puerto Rican. And they wanted to have a breakfast for children program, just like the Panthers, but for Puerto Rican kids in the in East Harlem. So I'm in this gathering in this church. They had taken over this church, and somebody taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around, and this little woman with glasses and a pencil in her ear, and she started asking me, "Oh, what are you doing here? What's your name, Mama?" And I said, "Gosh, she looks Japanese. Is she a reporter? What is she?" And then I find out her name is Mary Kochiyama, later known, of course, as Yuri Kochiyama. And Yuri, just said, "Who are you? What camp was your folks in?" And then she says, "Have you been involved with any of Asian Americans here? Any activists here?" And I said, "No." And she invited me to a meeting of Asian Americans for Action. And that was it. I became part of the Asian American movement. So in becoming part of a political organization like Asian Americans for Action, they had no idea I was an artist. And I didn't really make a big deal out of it because I was questioning a lot of things. And it was the first time I was just me. I wasn't me trying to have a career. I was me trying to figure out who I was in this world, and a chaotic world that everything seemed to be in question. And my role as an artist seemed less and less important to me. It just became less important. It was more important to stop the war in Vietnam and to stop the killing of people that look like me. And so that was a big moment. And it so happened in that group, AAA, Asian Americans for Action, a young man, his name was Chris Ijima. He happened to be a musician, and also he was one of the leaders of the organization, very active at Columbia University, and he's always been political. But he wrote some songs, and when we were in Chicago, he took out his guitar and he started playing around the guitar, and I just followed in, and it was really easy to sing with him. And so we wrote a song that night, and the next day, we sang this song in front of the Japanese American Citizens League, the JACL. They were having a convention there. And we sang this song in front of not only young people, young activists who had come to the JACL to protest and to say, we got to make a stand against Vietnam, for Vietnam, against the war of Vietnam. And they were pushing their elders to do that. And so this song became this moment of, oh my God, this is a powerful way of communicating. A simple song just brought everybody together. So it so happened that a terrible tragedy happened while we were in Chicago, and a young Japanese American activist, I think she was 16 years old, Evelyn, she was murdered in her hotel room. And her roommate went up to find her, and she also got her throat slit. Two young women. And Evelyn died, and we were like totally distraught. Like, what is this? Is this a threat against us? How did this happen? And we went back to New York and we said we want to go to the West Coast and connect with these people. And so we wrote about 5 or 6 songs, and we did a benefit at the New York Buddhist Church, and we raised enough money just to get out to LA, to the West Coast. And people on the West Coast organized performances, and we moved from Los Angeles to San Francisco to San Jose to Sacramento and Fresno, etc., moving around. And everywhere we moved, there were groups of people, young people, and who were organizing and who were working with kids with drugs and elders and were working to stop the war in Vietnam, etc. So suddenly we see, oh my God, we're a movement. It's not just, these small isolated groups of Asians. We're a movement. And we saw that this music had a real purpose. It wasn't about being in show business anymore at all. We were troubadours and we didn't get paid anything, and we didn't need a lot of money. People took care of us. But any time people asked us to sing, we went there and sang. If it was in a prison or a school or a rally or a concert hall, it was the same. We would do it. And that's how we grew our repertoire. That's how we met people and heard stories and wrote songs about those stories. And when we went back to New York, we got involved with Puerto Ricans and Dominicans in the squatters movement to take over buildings for poor Latinos, and we started singing in Spanish so we could and writing music in Spanish so we can communicate with their community. So it opened up another window of communication. So one thing sort of led to another, and at the end of this 3-year period of touring all over the place and organizing, always being an organizer at the same time, somebody asked us to make an album. Hold on just a second, okay? I need to go. The name of the person who asked us to make the album was Barbara Dane. And Barbara Dane was a singer, a blues singer, a white woman, but she was a soulful blues singer and a dedicated activist who's in Berkeley, who lives in Berkeley, and she's sort of passing right now. But she saw what we did and she said, I need to document this. So yeah, we went in the studio for 3 days and we did most of the songs we just did one take, and that was it. And we made an album in 3 days, 2.5 days. And it was called A Grain of Sand. so that album, it happened to be, I mean, there were others in the West Coast making music as well, and sort of a more, uh, you know, of different styles of jazz and sort of more fusion music, etc. Hiroshima is probably the most famous band, but certainly there were many other musicians on the rise. There was also theater on the rise at that time, in New York as well as in the West Coast, and dance and visual arts. It was like a renaissance because now suddenly the late 60s through the 70s was a moment when it was like a burst of energy that we had we didn't have a voice before that. There were individuals and artists, people who wanted to be artists and who were trained and but they didn't have a chance to really uh, to gain critical mass around them to push. And what the movement did was there were thousands of people who cared about this, who knew that we needed a voice. We needed it in film. We needed it in visual arts. We needed in all of these different forms. So it was a renaissance of culture that was that many voices were developing at the same time. And I think that's why I want to be here alive, because I was part of that. And I want young people to know that this is when we learn the importance of community. This is when we learn the importance of not just identity, of expressing ourselves as an Asian, but as a political Asian, as pushing the envelope, pushing for change. Also, it was the moment when we said we had to control our own voice. Chris said, "No, we don't want to make an album for a regular record company because they're going to try to make us sell records." And we knew we weren't going to make music that was going to sell records. No, we were making music that was going to change people. And that's what we did. And so it wasn't a career. So we'll get back to career in a bit. But at the end of 3 years, I decided to go home to Los Angeles because I felt like New York, I loved New York, and I felt like that was my second family in New York. But in order to really dig in deep into my community, I had to go home to Los Angeles, and so I returned to Los Angeles, and somebody took me to a Buddhist temple called Senjin Buddhist Temple, and the Reverend there, Mas Kodani, said, "Well, you need a place to teach dance. You could teach here in the social hall, and you can rehearse here." And so he gave me a space, and I taught dance, and I began to create work with other artists. Benny Yee was a musician, we said, and East West Players asked us to write a musical. And we said, sure. We didn't know what the hell we were doing, but we said, sure, well, let's try. So we wrote a musical called Chop Suey, and we were learning how to structure a theater piece around music, because that's what we knew. We knew how to write songs. So we tried to make the songs tell the story. And so in a way, it was sort of a rock opera, because there was little dialogue. It was mostly all music, songs with lyrics and stories that were told through songs. So this was a very creative time where we had the ability to experiment and fail and try again. But there was an energy the community would come and see our work. They would support us and tour. We toured from Los Angeles to Portland to Sacramento, etc. Because people in the community wanted to see themselves on the stage. They wanted to see their stories on the stage. And, Cats is part of that, as a continuum of this energy, where we know the importance of telling our story. So that led to my creating an organization called Great Leap, which was a nonprofit organization. Now, I didn't know anything about running an organization. I was interested in making art, but in order to make art and maybe get some grants, we had to have an organization. And little by little, I learned what it took to run an organization. And so that was another skill I was trying to learn. And people step forward. Somebody step forward, I'll write grants for you. Somebody else step forward, I'll help to be your administration of these, and booking, etc. So people started stepping forward, and we became a team that learned how to create our own work, how to present it, how to tour it, how to market it, how to hold and bring new people in, how to train people. We had, in our 25th year, we started this collaboratory to share the techniques that we use to gather stories. Because then we started not only creating with a creative team, we started going out into communities and creating work about these communities, and engaging people who were non-actors and getting them to tell their own stories and perform them on stage. So there are a lot of different levels of how to use the arts. And music has always sort of been at the core of what I do, whether I wrote a musical or I wrote the music for a ballet, or whether I was singing just a song by myself or singing with a band, or music has always been central for me, a way to tell stories. But being at Senshin Buddhist Temple, I was seeing how there were traditions of music and dance that Japanese Americans carried on from Japan. And that tradition was called Obon. So Bonodori, these songs and dances that were done in the summertime, dancing in the circle, was a really interesting place where music and dance came together. And Reverend Godani asked me in 1983 to write an Obon song in English so that young people would know why they were dancing. So it was sort of a unique situation, being in a Buddhist temple and sort of hanging around and listening to, Buddhist philosophy, how they did things within the temple. And it was, in a way, insulated me from the outside world. I didn't have to worry about paying a big rent. The people in the Sangha were interested in what we were doing. Some of them were in the movement as well. And then there was a taiko group there. So a lot of arts was created at Senshin Buddhist Temple in Los Angeles. And traditionally, through our our people, the temples and churches were always a place where we as Japanese Americans or Asian Americans had, it usually had a multi-purpose room that maybe they played basketball, but they also had a stage there. So they could do, put small performances on the stage. So, but the community, I just want to say how much I see as my inspiration, the community, my support, and my sense of belonging that it's given me. And a sense of healing also, because that little girl who was uprooted and lost when I was 2 years old, my healing began when I danced and heard music, but it continued on as I was in the movement, and there were other people who realized they had trauma, they had wounds, we all lived through racism. And so we were working through all of these things, and art is a healing space. Art is a way, not only do we express it, but we have witness. But we're witness, so our stories are witnessed. And in that witnessing, the telling and the witnessing is a space of healing. In dancing in a circle at Obon, when we feel our oneness, that's a space of healing. Because when we live in this bigger world, we have to deal with a lot of intentional and unintentional abuses and rejections. And it's important for us to have spaces where we can be totally ourselves. And we can create ourselves in those spaces. We're always changing, we're always growing, and we're not just Japanese or Chinese. We're a part of many things. Our world is not limited to that. I have a Black son. And I was a single mother for 12, 13 years. And so I learned what it was to be a Black mother. I have 4 grandchildren who are basically the world sees as Black, but they know they're Japanese too. So these are, and they're Muslim, and there's a war going on in Gaza and in the Middle East, and so I have to be involved in that. I have a reason to speak out about these things. So our life becomes our inspiration, our community becomes our inspiration, the questions we have, the troubles we have. So as artists, being a performer is one thing. It's a starting space. And how do you create longevity? Yes, say you're an actor. Okay, I want to be able to be acting when I'm 50 and 60, etc. I play character roles. Yes, that's it. But to make a living at doing one thing, good luck. And there are people that do it, but I could never do that. I just couldn't do it because I couldn't accept just playing another role. I wanted to create my own roles. I wanted to experiment how far I could push myself. So being a creator is another area of opening. So you can be an actor or performer, but then to be a creator, that's another space. And sometimes people, you know, as folk artists, and I think in a way I'm a folk artist, they may have other jobs, you know, and then on the weekends they play music. And that's great. I think the more people who experience the arts, whether they do it for a living or not, it doesn't mean whether they are good or not. Just because you make a living at it doesn't mean that you're the best. You can, you know, there are painters who were insurance people and then they painted and then, but they did great art. So sometimes having the peace of mind to have a regular gig and then creating space to do your art can work really well. I could not have sustained myself over these 50 years if I didn't have an organization. So that meant that I didn't spend as much time being an artist. I had to also be a producer. I had to also be an administrator. I also had to raise money, etc. There were many years when I didn't perform that much. So, you know, combining our skills and seeing it all as things that we need to do in order to keep moving forward is important, I think. And being able to live and keep creating is a success as it is. Even if you don't only make money doing art, but continuing to make art, whether you is full-time or not, doesn't matter. I think I'm going to have to take a break here.